Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. So today, first, I want to talk about elections. I want to talk about democracy. Now, here in the United States, you oftentimes hear about the far left talking about those that are moderates, or who they call right wing, are a direct threat to democracy. Oftentimes you hear the far left calling Russian president, elected president, Putin, a tyrant, a dictator, even a threat to American democracy. I want to read an article out of Newsweek, and it's very interesting. This appeared a couple of days ago, and listen to the narrative. I'm going to start reading this here. Last week, Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed that the country's presidential election, that in peacetime would be expected next March. I believe that's when the Russian election is as well. Hopefully someone will correct me on that if I am incorrect. Will not be taking place while Ukraine remains under martial law, while Ukraine remains under an imposed martial law by Zelensky and is in a state of war with the Russian Federation. Western right-wing social media personalities, I'll say that again, Western right-wing social media personalities, these personalities are actually moderates, middle-of-the-road personalities. The left calls anything now that is in opposition to their ideology ultra right wing. Anything. You could actually be a left wing, and you can eventually make it into the quote unquote right wing circle. Western right-wing social media personalities predictably greeted this news as confirmation that their prejudices against Ukrainian democracy. Failed politician and 2020 U.S. election denier, right? They're calling the other side election deniers when we have quite literally thousands upon thousands of statements by Democrat officials, Democrat supporters, calling previous elections a fallacy and denying those very elections. It's the pot calling the kettle black. Was among those who complained, saying on X, formerly known as Twitter, Zelensky is considering canceling elections in Ukraine. I didn't realize that democracy could just be turned off and on like a TV. Well, but that's exactly what's happening. The Russian Federation is at war, and they're holding elections. The Ukraine is at war, is under martial law, has been that way for quite some time, actually, because of the civil war that was taking place in eastern Ukraine. But I guess now is a good time for the power moves to be made, and then to prevent those elections from occurring. So when these elections don't occur, and you have now a de facto tyrant, Zelensky, who canceled elections, are we still going to call the Russian operation against the Ukrainian regime Obviously, it's not elected, right? So what do we call it then? I don't think anyone knows. Here in the United States, we have been in wars, we have been in conflicts, and elections have not been canceled. But in Ukraine, that is happening. No elections. So we'll see what happens regarding that. We'll see if elections ever happen again in Ukraine. Difficult to say at this point. Again, there will be elections in the Russian Federation. Obviously, there's even reports that that Putin is concerned about certain military operations because of the upcoming elections. So very, very interesting to see how that narrative is indeed explained by the left and even non-persons on the left here in the United States who look at what is happening on the ground. But the fighting continues in Ukraine. The battles continue. Very heavy fighting continuing to take place within the vicinity of Avdiivka. As I've said before in recent videos, the noose continues to tighten in that area, and we anticipate that eventually the same outcome in terms of what happened in Bakhmut will occur in Avdiivka. Now, is this a prudent military plan by the Ukrainian military to continue to defend Avdiivka? Is it an option? Is it a reasonable option for the Ukrainians to continue to defend Avdiivka? I mean, if you look at the map, if you look at the salient, again, very difficult situation. I think we've reached a point now for the Ukrainians that any withdrawal, any attempt to pull out of Avdiivka would risk a collapse of the front line. But the Ukrainians have invested so much in Avdiivka, it gives them the ability to shell and attack Donetsk, one of the main cities in Novorossiya. The city here, again, you can see it's essentially, Avdiivka is essentially, here in the United States, Avdiivka would be a suburb of Donetsk. So again, is it something that the Ukrainians should have done in the first place in terms of trying to hold Avdiivka? Yes, it has caused the Russians to expend lots of equipment, lots of manpower dedicated to this operation because of the fortifications in and around Avdiivka. But when it falls, does it risk causing a greater collapse of the Ukrainian military at some point? And we have to look at that very, very closely, and we will continue to watch what is happening in this area of the ongoing war. In other areas, we are continuing to see very heavy fighting taking place. Obviously, Kupiansk. We are continuing to see very heavy fighting taking place near Bakhmut, and then obviously in the southwest of the conflict as well. We continue to see these Ukrainian operations where they are taking these small inflatable boats, smaller craft, and transporting troops to the eastern bank of the Dnieper River and attempting to hold areas again along this eastern bank, this marshland that there are a battalion-sized element of Ukrainian forces that are continuing to operate in this area. The Russian defensive positions just to the east near Leshki and in other areas continue to hold. At this point, it does not appear the Russians, as I talked about before, see any sort a real threat coming from Kherson or coming from those Ukrainian forces that land in this area. Now, we are also seeing the use of Russian drones attacking those inflatable craft that are bringing much needed food and supplies over to the Ukrainian forces that are operating on this eastern bank of the Dnieper River. That appears to be now the plan for Russian forces, is to cut off the ability of Ukrainian forces to supply those naval infantry, those marine forces that are operating on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. And we're going to continue to watch that very, very closely as well. Additionally, we are starting to see new weapon systems being used by Russian forces. Obviously, the Ukrainians are using weapon systems provided by the NATO alliance, by the United States. We're seeing, obviously, the anti-tank guided weapons, the HIMARS, and a range of other systems that have been provided by the Ukrainians. But we're starting to see new weapon systems being fielded by Russian forces. We're seeing new types of anti-tank guided weapon systems, higher quality anti-tank guided weapon systems that are now being used. We're starting to see some of those anti-tank guided weapon systems that we would call anti-tank guided weapon systems in the traditional sense now being armed with thermal barrack warheads, attacking Ukrainian troops in the field. And again, the Russian doctrine in terms of using these drones, these kamikaze drones, is definitely speeding up. We're seeing the mass production of these weapon systems by the Russians. We're seeing also the stockpiling of Russian cruise missiles. Over the last few months, there has not been a major operation by the Russians using Caliber and KH-101 cruise missiles against Ukrainian targets. Now, we believe the Russians have been stockpiling these systems for a possible winter offensive designed to go after the Ukrainian energy sector and military targets deep in the rear of the front lines. Again, some reports indicate that the Russians have stockpiled between 800 and 1,000 of these various cruise missiles that could be used in the coming weeks and months as we approach winter. So that's kind of where we sit. Again, we will continue to watch things very, very closely. We're continuing to watch the Russian noose tighten around Avdiivka. And we will continue to monitor that situation. Thanks for joining us. More to come very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.